Most birds flap their wings up and down, but hummingbirds flap theirs more like insects. They twist their wings around between strokes and so can generate lift when flapping both forwards and backwards. Doing this at high speed puts a huge strain on their wings. So, to withstand it, the wings have a special structure.
The hummingbird wing is very stiff and undergoes few changes in shape as it rapidly beats back and forth.
Animals often use surrounding visual landmarks to return to locations that house important resources, such as nectar and pollen provided by flowers or hidden caches. Hummingbirds being one of those animals. Hummingbirds use visual landmarks to return to past locations. However, landmarks are usually seen as a wider panorama rather than individual landmarks. These landmarks are perceived using angular sizes or relative angle position. Because landmarks are rarely examined outside of the laboratory, it is unclear whether these search patterns reflect what is used in the wild. Experimenters used a flower as a landmark in training methods that was relocated each time a trial was run. The researchers theorized that if hummingbirds extract and use landmark to-go vectors, as birds are typically thought to do, then they should hover over locations in which the distances and directions of one or both landmarks are maintained, even if the view of the landmark is different than previously experienced.
They conducted this research using 8 wild male rufous hummingbirds. They used non-toxic ink to individually mark their chests that lasted for 6 weeks of the field session. They tested along the West Castle Valley within the eastern range of the Canadian Rockies in western Alberta. During the study, the hummingbirds were trained to feed from artificial flour, which was placed in the equilateral triangle with a pair of plastic landmarks. The orientation was never changed during the training. 9 trials were conducted, with the 10th being a pre-test, which determined whether the hummingbirds had learned the location of the flower after the 9 visits. There were 2 other tests that were set up to conduct this experiment. The first is the expansion test, where they placed a hexagonal grid over the stop locations and counted the number of stops in each hexagon. To compare the 2 expansion tests, visually they colored each cell based on the number of stops it contained, creating a heat map.
For the result of the pretest, they found that the bird did not stop at the location where the flower should have been found. Half of them stopped at the opposite side, while the other half stopped close to or southwest of it. As for the expansion test, what they found out was that the hummingbird stops were significantly more clustered than expected from an even distribution in the view consistent expansion test, but not the case with the view inconsistent expansion test. In the view consistent expansion test, hummingbirds were significantly more likely to stop on the side of the landmark where the flower had been than on the other side. If we compare the 2 tests, hummingbird tended to search more on the flower side of the landmark more in the view consistent expansion than the view inconsistent expansion. Given that hummingbirds search more in the direction of the flower in view consistent expansion, they might have estimated the distance at which they prefer searching more precisely when the landmark was similar to that during training. The strategy used by a hummingbird in the view consistent test not only including the distance at which they searched, but also how likely they were to have used for inter-landmark angle. For the rotation test, the density of the stop was not significantly different with each stop in a different hexagonal cell. The highest density of stop was around the training region of the southern landmark. When divided into quadrants, the bird stopped significantly more in the bottom left quadrant. Overall, it wasn't significantly enough when everything was standardized.
These findings show that wild hummingbirds don't perform navigational tasks as expected of other birds in a laboratory setting. While other species of bird, such as pigeons and nutcrackers, navigate their environment by using vectors pinpointed to specific items in their environment, these data seem to show that hummingbirds use panorama view matching to navigate environments. While not similar to any other bird species, this navigational strategy is eerily similar to the way ants and bees navigate their environment, matching a panorama rather than individual objects. More tests of birds outside a laboratory setting would be needed to make a sound conclusion about the navigation of hummingbirds. But this similarity between hummingbird and insect navigation could be another interesting example of convergent characteristics between hummingbirds and insects, along with their flight style.